Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. We welcome everyone to the book release and colloquium at the MS Subbulakshmi Auditorium at Asian College of Journalism. I would like to welcome Mr. Sashi Kumar, the chairperson, Asian College of Journalism, to set the ball rolling with a few introductory words.
Very good morning. Today, we in the public sphere or in civil society are again keenly aware of the Constitution and keenly concerned about our democracy. I say again because in the mid-1970s, as you know, we faced in many ways a somewhat similar situation when our constitutional rights, protections, guarantees seemed to be under duress, being challenged. That was, of course, the dark chapter of the emergency in our post-independent history, a chapter we assumed was behind us. Today, though, the Constitution seems to be again in the crosshairs of an aggrandizing state propelled by a mindset of majoritarianism, impatient with the constitutional do's and don'ts or niceties. There is an uneasy sense of the spirit, if not the letter, of the Constitution being eroded, and on the implications this has for our democracy. This is the context of this colloquium today on the Constitution and democracy. In the earlier context of the emergency, in the landmark Minerva Mills versus Union of India, which elaborated the basic structure doctrine where the Constitution itself limits the power of Parliament to amend the Constitution, and Section 4 of the 42nd Amendment was struck down as unconstitutional. The then Chief Justice Y.V. Chandrachud had observed 3 articles of the Constitution, and only 3, stand between the heaven of freedom into which Tagore wanted his country to awake. He was referring, of course, to the famous Invocation by Tagore way back in 1913, several decades before independence, where the mind is without fear and the head is held high, where knowledge is free, where words come out from the depth of truth, where the clear stream of reason has not lost its way into the dreary desert sand of dead habit, into that heaven of freedom, my father, let my country awake, to paraphrase the poem. He said, 3 articles stand between that heaven of freedom into which Tagore wanted his country to awake and the abyss of unrestrained power, as he put it. And the 3 articles were Article 14, which is equality before law, Article 19, which concerns us as a J school, freedom of speech and expression, freedom to practice any profession, and Article 21, the right to life and personal liberty. I believe these 3 fundamental rights will be in focus in the proceedings of the day. It's my proud privilege to extend a very grateful welcome to our chief guest today, Justice.J. Chalemeshwar, whom one has admired from a distance, whose participation on the benches which have delivered landmark verdicts are known to all of us, and who is one of the rare, I think, distinguished judges who has been self-reflective about the role of the judiciary itself. As you know, he's a consistently opposed the collegium system, for example. If I remember right, he's called it a euphemism for nepotism. So it's a distinct privilege, really, to have him with us. We had, in fact, hoped to have him for our convocation a couple of years back, but then things did not work out. And I'm so glad that we have him here with us on this occasion. We're also, of course, very happy to have Mr. Kallishwaram Raj, who is the author of the book that will be released today, Our Constitutional Concerns, whom I know for some time now. And in fact, I made his acquaintance through an editorial or edit page article he wrote in the Hindu years back, where he was very critical about these high-paid lawyers in the Supreme Court who were not accessible to the public because they were just too expensive. They were not affordable to the public. And I thought that a very bold and very different criticism by somebody in the profession about his own fraternity. So I reached out to him, and that's how we got to know each other. Subsequently, of course, I've been following him. Many of you might have read his articles in newspapers and periodicals or in law journals. I must say also that he's my counsel on a couple of public interest litigations in the Supreme Court. So very warm welcome to Mr. Chelamaeswar Raj. Let me also welcome, although he's part of the college, the institution, the trust, my senior mentor, N. Ram, who is a trustee of the Media Development Foundation and the college, and he will be here with us through the day and chairing the first session. Mr. N. Ram, as you know, is and the publisher of Tulika Books, a book which has been written by Chelamaeswar Raj and to be released right after my welcome address, Indira Chandrasekhar. She's a publisher and chief editor of Tulika Books. Let me also welcome our distinguished dignitaries who will be following the initial book release function into the substantive part of our colloquium. Justice.J Chandru, who I am proud to say is a friend of our institution. We go to him for counsel on various issues. He has, in fact, formulated the guidelines for our internal complaints committee under the Vaishaka guidelines and so on. And it's a distinct pleasure again to have him with us, Justice Chandru. I'm also he was, of course, as you all know, retired judge of the Madras High Court. And Justice K. Kannan, who is a retired judge of the Punjab and Haryana High Court, whom we are familiar with through his writings, again, on legal issues in law journals. And he's an expert in the area of mediation. And we will be, of course, hearing from them in the session that follows this particular book release part and the keynote address. And Professor Anushka Singh from the Dr. Ambedkar University who's with us, who will be there in the second part of the session, post-lunch. She is a professor of law in the Ambedkar University, an author who's just authored a very highly regarded book on sedition. And as discussants in that second part, we have a senior counsel, R. Vaigai, who will be joining us shortly towards the afternoon. We have our own adjunct faculty and senior lawyer in Madras High Court, Geeta Ramaseshan, and our own Vikas Pathak, Dr. Vikas Pathak, who is a faculty of the Asian College of Journalism. So a very warm welcome also to all the guests who have come here to join us. I hope you will participate in the colloquium, and we'll have a very meaningful day where we can look at the various issues that affect the overarching theme of what we are going to discuss today, the Constitution and democracy. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Sashi Kumar. As a token of our gratitude and appreciation, we would like to honor our chief guest, Justice.J Chalemeshwar, with the traditional Ponnadai. I now request Ishwar Dahal to honor our chief guest. I now request Jnaneshwar Rajan to honor Mr. Chelamaeswar Raj, the author of the book being released. Neeti Rojan will now greet the publisher of the book, Ms. Indira Chandrasekhar. We will now proceed with the event. First, we have the launch of the book, Constitutional Concerns, Writings on Law and Life, by Mr. Chelamaeswar Raj, which is published by Tulika Books. We request our chief guest of the day, Justice.J Chalemeshwar, to release the book, and we request Mr. N. Ram, Director, the Hindu Publishing Group, to receive the copy. We would now request Ms. Indira Chandrasekhar, publisher Tulika Books, to introduce the book.
Thank you. I'm sorry about the slight confusion regarding the book. It's my privilege to introduce the book, especially, and I feel a bit humble doing so, in the presence of both the author of the book, Chelamaeswar Raj, and Justice Chalemeshwar, who has written the foreword to the book. Nevertheless, since this is the task I have been given, I'll try and give you a quick outline of what this book contains. Most of you may have seen copies of it outside. Copies are available. Please do pick up a copy when you leave. As the title of the book specifies, the book is titled Constitutional Concerns, and in the author's own words, which I shall try and recall here, he has tried to encapsulate in the articles that are collected in this volume the severe setback to India's polity during the period 2018 to 2021, which is distinct and unprecedented. These 4 years, in continuation with the political shift that occurred with the Narendra Modi I regime in 2014, point to the country's transformation. And it is a change, if not checked, says Mr. Chelamaeswar Raj, that can lead to the annihilation of the very idea of India. That sets the tone of the volume, as it were. The book, very briefly, is divided into 4 parts. The 4 parts being titled On Laws, Part 1, On the Courts, Part 2, On Freedom, Part 3, On Politics, Part 4, and On Life, Part 5. And the collection analyzes, through these articles that comprise these 5 parts, certain moments of constitutional concern in India over the last 4 years, when India's democracy was struggling, again to quote the author. And these articles, although published previously in newspapers and periodicals, have been collected and organized, structured anew in terms of the thematic integrity of each part that I have just cited. The first 4 chapters in Part 1, take stock of a few parliamentary legislations of recent origin, including, of course, the abrogation of the special status of Kashmir, Article 370, the Citizenship Amendment Act, the 3 farm laws, and so on, just to name some of the significant legislations that all of us are aware of. Part 2 of the book, chapters 5 to 18, deal with the authority, the methodology, and the attitude of the courts of India in various contexts. Similarly, chapters 19 to 25, which comprises part 3 of the book, look at questions of freedom that have arisen in different contexts and in the context of our legal framework. Part 4, which comprises chapters 25 to 39, addresses the issues of mass movements, the electoral process itself, and governance as an overarching principle. Part 5, the last part, and the last 4 chapters, chapters 40 to 43, deal with laws dealing with questions of life itself and the death penalty, AFSPA, the Lakhimpur question, the children's rights question. These are issues that are dealt with in these last few chapters. This is just a bird's eye view of the book, and I will not stand between you and our honorable chief guest, Justice Chalemeshwar, who will deliver the keynote address. Please do take a copy of the book to see in more details what it contains. Thank you.
Thank you so much, ma'am. We now request Mr. Chelamaeswar Raj, Lawyer, Supreme Court of India, who has written extensively on constitutional issues, to say a few words as the author of the book.
Mr. Shashikumar, the Honorable Chief Guest, Mr. Justice Chalemeshwar, Mr. Ram, Srimati Indira Chandrasekhar, and the distinguished panelists in different sessions, Justice Kannan, Justice Chandru, and Ms. Anushka, and other distinguished persons of the dais. I know for sure that an author making a speech on the book could even be disastrous. So I won't rather venture to speak much on that, since the book is supposed to speak for itself. And as lawyers, we know the value of silence than that of the arguments. And very many cases we generally win, not out of arguments, but rather out of silence in the appropriate time, as the occasion demands. So this also, I think, is a situation where I should not speak much on the book. After all, it's a set of concerns, and concern is a very problematic term. Every concern, every chapter in the book is almost reflecting one or other concern. And this concern is like a living being. Every concern is like a living being. It has a heart of its own, it has a brain of its own, it has its feelings, it has its thoughts. But at the end of the day, the book contains a lot of apprehensions. And to be very blunt, some kind of pessimism as well. But it would be the happiest moment for the author if the apprehensions come untrue, or the fears come untrue. And if certain apprehensions are proved to be wrong in the future to come. My only task for the time being is to thank several persons who, in fact, directly or indirectly contributed to the work. In fact, the production of the book by the publisher, I am sure that has surpassed its content. And for that, I'm extremely grateful to Indira Chandrasekhar and Tulika Books and the editor who did the work excellently from Delhi. And in fact, when I think about the book, I should first of all thank my senior, who was one of the most favorite junior to Justice Krishnaiyer, who practiced in the Malabar area of Kerala. In fact, that office caught my attention during my teenagers. When I saw my senior's library, I saw Heidegger, Kant, Schopenhauer, Hegel, Marx, and of course Goethe, and all other literary figures in his library. And that rather indirectly communicated to me that this is rather a profession where you have a lot of space for philosophy, for literature, for thoughts, for emotional intelligence, everything. And this is not just a technocrat's job. I should thank my senior, Mr. M.B. Govindan Nambiyar, in this occasion. But coming straight away from that, he had a habit. He had a habit of reading the entire books, making his own notes at the end of the book. And even in law books, he was to write the new citations which overrules the earlier citations, which rewrites the earlier judgments, which distinguishes the earlier pronouncements on law, etc. Now, after seeing this book being published by Tulika Books, I find 4 blank pages, 4 empty pages at the end of the book. And probably in a rather symbolic way, those are the pages where my young friends, the next generation, my juniors, learners of law, students of law, are going to write something on. And it is that emptiness that motivates me. It is that unfilled papers that I am curiously looking on. How the time will judge this, how the generations will judge this. Therefore, this again is a time where I should emphasize this emptiness part of it, this silence, the requirement of silence on it. Of course, a lawyer can afford to be rather silent in certain occasions. An author also can. But the problem is that the nation cannot afford to be silent, especially in hard situations, in tough times. And therefore, there is a requirement for conversations. And this colloquium that follows is on that conversation. I will also have my brief share in that, a humble share in that, in the evening session. I also look forward to that. And I once again thank Asian College of Journalism, and especially Mr. Ram and Mr. Shashikumar for facilitating this occasion where I got one more opportunity to see my young friends in Asian College of Journalism, which is regarded as the pioneer institution in the field of journalism in the whole, probably in the whole globe. I'm thankful for that. We will rather start this conversation and continue this conversation for the time to come, for a better future for all of us and for the whole nation. Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir. Now, for the highlight of the day, we have the keynote address by Justice.J. Chalemeshwar on the overarching theme of the colloquium, the Constitution and Democracy. Justice.J. Chalemeshwar, as we all know, has been one of the most distinguished judges of the Supreme Court of India. He retired in June 2018. Before his elevation to the Supreme Court in 2011, he served as the Chief Justice of the Kerala and the Guwahati High Court. His landmark judgments in the Supreme Court continue to be very important and relevant and speak to the concerns of our colloquium today. He was one of the judges constituting the bench which held Section 66A of the Information Technology Act unconstitutional. He was one of the 3-judge bench which ruled that no Indian without an Aadhaar card can be deprived of the basic services or government subsidies. He has been strongly opposed to the collegium system of appointing judges, calling it a euphemism of nepotism. He was one of the 9 judges in the landmark Puttu Swami judgment, which declared privacy to be a fundamental right. Of course, one cannot forget the dramatic press conference in January 2018, in which he and 3 other judges spoke up against the non-transparent manner of allotment of cases and administration of justice in the highest court of the land. Ladies and gentlemen, Justice.J Chalemeshwar.
Distinguished personalities on and off the dais, my young friends who are pursuing the course of journalism, ladies and gentlemen. It gives me great pleasure to be before you this morning for various reasons. One is Chennai. Of course, for you it's Chennai. For me, it's still Madras, because by the time I came to study here in 1969, it was Madras. So it's always a pleasure to come back to this city. I spent some of the most beautiful years of my life in this city. And second reason is, being in the company of youngsters is always a pleasurable thing. It makes old people like me feel a little younger in the company of youngsters. Of course, third and more important, the distinguished company of people like Mr. Ram, my former colleagues on the bench. Maybe physically we never shared a bench, but then we belong to the same brotherhood. Justice Chandru and Justice Kannan. Brother, I'm sorry, in between two, which one of you is senior, I don't remember, therefore don't bother about the way I mentioned it. Otherwise, we are so tradition-bound or precedent-oriented, we go by these things. And now, though in 2022 August, if I have to speak about constitution and democracy, those words sound strange to me at the age of 70. A not very famous but well-known American jurist, Robert Burke, who eventually couldn't make it to the Supreme Court of America, once made a statement. The question nowadays is not how to read the Constitution, but whether to read it. That is the question. We have reached that stage in India. The reasons are many. Who is responsible for it is a different question. It requires a long debate. Maybe we can debate for days together on that. But broadly speaking, all the three constitutional wings are equally responsible for this state of affairs: the legislature, the executive, and the judiciary. Each one of these organs is equally responsible for the state of affairs. And particularly, the judiciary must take a little more of the blame for the reason. A general belief, and in theory, judiciary is supposed to be the watchdog of the Constitution and its values. Unfortunately, it happened in this country for a period of 70 years. A practice by which the highest court of the land sits in division benches and decides matters, which led to any amount of uncertainty in law, and more particularly on constitutional issues. I personally, it's not for the first time I'm saying it, I said it many times, and more particularly delivering late Justice H.R. Khanna Memorial Lecture in Delhi sometime in 1916, if I remember, 15 or 16, I don't remember. I said it, and I was not the first person to say it. Much before that, some 20 years before that, former Chief Justice of India, Justice.J, delivering Saraladi Memorial Lectures, rather the first Saraladi Memorial Lecture in Hyderabad, he said the Supreme Court has become a two-judge court because matters are decided by two judges. No, question is not one of numbers. Question is one of the consistency of the institution. The minute the highest court starts sitting in division benches, on the same day there can be conflicting opinions coming from the highest court. I may tell you an anecdote to which I was a witness. Long back in 1983, I was an young lawyer those days, but I was fortunate in the professional sense of it. After putting in 7 years at the bar, I had the good fortune of appearing or representing the Chief Minister of a state in an election petition, late Mr. N.T. Ramarao. Now, that's a long story. I don't want to go to the full story and waste your time. With reference to a particular question, the Andhra Pradesh High Court, the learned single judge, election petitions are tried by single judges, one judge in the High Court level, ordered notice to the Attorney General on a particular question of law. Mr. Parasharan, who was the Attorney General those days, took a couple of adjournments. He was busy with Bhopal gas case and so on and so forth. Came eventually. Then after the issue was debated for some time, the judge, of course, there is an element of mischief in it. The judge asked Ms. Parasharan, Ms. Parasharan, I even know that you have answered my question. I have one more question. Last year, there was a judgment of the Supreme Court on a particular aspect of the Representation of People Act, in Karunanidhi's case, late Mr. Karunanidhi for 1983 Supreme Court judgment. There was a judgment. Exactly 3 months or 4 months later, another judgment of the Supreme Court came on the same proposition, Madan Mohan versus returning officer or something. Both the judgments are almost diametrically contradictory. So the learned judge, after making this statement, asked the Attorney General, because he is the principal legal advisor of this country, asked the Attorney General, Mr. Attorney General, what should a High Court judge do confronted with a situation like this? Mr. Parasharan had a great sense of humor. He told the judge, my lords, your lordships are very lucky. There are at least 2 judgments before your lordships to choose. More often nowadays in the Supreme Court, I am confronted with a situation. I rely on an earlier part of a judgment and my opponent relies on the later part of the same judgment, he said. And this happened and I was a witness to it. So this is the problem. If this is the problem of the highest court sitting in division benches, that is a contribution. But anyway, we can go on like this. The point is this. Every wing made its own contribution for the state of affairs. A few years back, when I was still in the Supreme Court, there was some occasion in Delhi, there was in a gathering, somebody organized some program, something to do with the Constitution. It was held the meeting was held in the Constitution Club. About some 50 people participated. Almost each one of them was somebody in the system, in the sense either he was a serving officer or a judge or a former officer, something like that. Then the question was regarding the electoral reforms. A former election commissioner of India, Mr. Brahma, made a statement. Things are going from bad to worse. People are spending about 40-50 crores to become members of the parliament. This was 6 years back. I'm sure the scales must have gone up now. At least I know in Andhra Pradesh, I know a couple of candidates who spent 70, 80 crores in the last election. At least reputed. I can't prove it. There is a reputation. Now, when Mr. Brahma made this statement, all these 40, 50 people, each one of them, as I told you, they were either holding an office, I was still holding an office. Some of them were retired bureaucrats, a couple of retired judges, and others were there. Everybody smiled. When my turn came, I mentioned this. This is the most unfortunate situation. So we are willing to smile at this statement. This is something too serious for a democracy. And we are not able to show any different reaction. Maybe we have become cynical, maybe we have come to accept that it can't be changed, therefore we smile and forget about it. If that is our attitude, let's not talk about democracy anymore. If democracy in this country has come to a stage, it means holding a festival of election every 5 years, spend as much money as possible, distribute as much liquor as possible, get elected, and afterwards whatever you believe is right. And constitution, ultimately, my dear, at least it's meant for the younger generation, not the lawyers and former judges can close their ears. See, what is the need of a constitution ultimately? Democracy and constitution, they are not synonymous. There can be a democracy, it all depends once again what is your definition of democracy. Holding a periodic election itself is democracy. Well, there's no need for a constitution. In fact, if any student of mathematics here, well, of course, I was a very bad student of mathematics, therefore I became a lawyer, but I still vaguely remember a little bit of it. There is a theory called set theory in mathematics. Mr. Ram, by any chance, are you a student of mathematics? No, thank you. So there's a theory called set theory. And then every theory has its own, even in sciences, every theory has its own limitations. Bertrand Russell made a comment about this set theory. The limitation on set theory gives a very interesting illustration. The statement is, this example belongs to an era where the safety razors were not in the market. People used to go to a barber for shaving. So the statement is, the barber shaves everybody in the village, in the sense men, of course. Then the second statement is, the barber shaves himself. So the statement is partial truth. The barber shaves everybody in the village is one part of the statement. Everybody means everybody in the village constitutes a sect. The barber shaves himself. So he alone constitutes a different set. Anyway, this is the limitation on the set theory, of course. That's what Bertrand Russell's point is. When we talk about all these things, democracy, the limitation is this. I'm sure all of you would have heard the story of Aristotle. I'm sorry. Sorry. Socrates. I'm sorry. Socrates. Now, when Socrates was condemned to death, he was killed by administration of poison, hemlock or something like that. He was condemned to death. The punishment or the judgment was not given by an individual judge like Chalemeshwar or Justice.J or Justice Gandhi. It was the entire citizenry of Athens city which gathered there and found him guilty of whatever it is. Spreading wrong ideas and spoiling the youngsters. Maybe tomorrow I'll be also hauled up for that. That's a different matter. That is a charge on which he was found guilty. If democracy means only numbers and the participation of people, the punishment, the trial and punishment of Socrates is the most democratic act. But the further question is it a democracy in which people like us would like to live is a different story. Therefore, we qualify it saying that it is not a liberal democracy because something more is required. It's not only the numbers, but these numbers should be guided by some better standards of ethical or the rational principles by which people would govern themselves. It is this requirement which necessitates the existence of a constitution. Getting elected, but unfortunately what happens is elected people all over the country, all over the world, not only in this country, with varying degrees of refinement or lack of faith, believe that electoral majority and victory at the election confers the legitimacy for everything which the elected government does. That's unfortunately that's become the problem. Now, to check this tendency, this system of constitutional governance was invented by the genius of mankind. When the American Constitution was being drafted, three prominent public men published a series of articles regarding the future of the American state. Those papers are collectively published later in the name of the Federalist. One of those papers, if I remember right, paper 9, if I remember right, the author says, I think it's Alexander Hamilton, if men were to be angels, no government is required to rule them. And if angels were to rule men, no law would be required to guide them. See, it is that law, it's that factor which requires, which impels the existence of a constitution. Even if I'm electing somebody, that elected man or woman should decide my fate or my fellow citizens' fate in accordance with some rational principles. So, to make it possible, a constitutional scheme, a constitutional system was evolved. All these documents, whether it's Indian Constitution or American Constitution or some other constitution, they contain the core beliefs and principles of that particular society which adopted the constitution, from which the elected members may not deviate. In what? No. Within the framework of those principles, they may have a lot of freedom to experiment. But when there are there are some principles which, to give you a most well-known or notorious example, Mr. Shashikumar was mentioning about emergency. An argument was advanced before the Supreme Court during emergency. When the fundamental rights of the citizens are suspended, nobody can approach the court complaining that his life or liberty is in danger. Therefore, he seeks the protection. And the argument was advanced on behalf of the state. Life and liberty are granted by the Constitution. When those rights are suspended, Constitution provides for suspension of fundamental rights in certain circumstances, emergencies. Suspended, nobody can be heard to say that his life, it is only the Constitution which grants life, therefore he can't complain that he has no independent right. And for a good measure or bad measure, Supreme Court accepted the argument. Well, a lot of good, bad commentaries came thereafter after the judgment. But unfortunately, it took 40 years before anybody finally said that judgment is bad law, officially. It was in the privacy matter which that 9-judge bench said it. The point is not that. Point is, if we believe that the Constitution would safeguard us, it's a sad mistake. And I'm not saying it for the first time. A lot of people before me said it. Starting from Joseph's story, at least I remember. Maybe somebody else also said it before him. If people are not vigilant, people do not take care of their rights, people do not bother about their liberties, people do not stand up and fight for their rights and liberties, no document, no constitution can save your lives or liberties. It's for the people ultimately to stand up and safeguard their rights and liberties. Now, when we are talking about the contribution made by the various wings, just yesterday somebody forwarded a WhatsApp message to me. An honorable member of the Rajya Sabha from Kerala, I think, yes, Wilson is from Kerala, no? Made a grand speech about the selection process of the members of the higher judiciary. And of course, the time-worn cliche of attributed to T.T. Krishnamachari, saying there is imperium and imperio. I'm not very sure it is, but he mentioned it to be Krishnamachari, but I vaguely remembered it as a statement made by Dr. Ambedkar in the Constituent Assembly. It doesn't matter whether Mr. Krishnamachari said it or Ambedkar said it. A grand speech was made. No, that's not the point. So many people have spoken about that. And the chairman of the Rajya Sabha made an interesting comment, saying that yesterday a lot of discussion took place about this judges selection process. And unfortunately, not even one newspaper published some, I think you're nodding your head, you must have seen this clip. Sorry, ma'am. Yeah, no, somebody forwarded it. Not even a single newspaper published one sentence about this debate. He sounded very disturbed. But the point is, what was the role played by the Rajya Sabha on certain occasions when these questions arose? Well, if I start going into it, once again, there will be a lot of ruckus in this country. I don't want to rake up that issue. Why is it that, but I'll mention one thing. Chalemeshwar in his book referred to this particular matter. There was a judge called V.N. Shukla, Narayan Shukla, if I remember right, of Allahabad High Court. There were serious allegations about a particular aspect of the matter. And those allegations were not limited to Mr. Narayan Shukla, but people much higher than him. There were allegations about it. Let's not go into all those things. Let us confine to the recorded facts. There was, after a lot of trouble in this matter, the then Chief Justice of India, it appears, ordered an in-house inquiry against this judge. I use the word it appears because as J1 of this country at that point of time, that is the next senior most judge of this country in Supreme Court, I was not aware of this in-house inquiry, nor any one of the other judges in the hierarchy of the matter. Inquiry was ordered. 3 Chief Justices of different high courts constituted the committee created by the Chief Justice of India. It appears they submitted a report condemning or finding this gentleman guilty of some misconduct. This report was not made known to any one of the other members of the Supreme Court officially. Maybe somebody had private information, somebody was close to the then Chief Justice of India. But officially it was not communicated to anybody. At least not to me or any other member of the collegium at that point of time. And obviously no action was initiated because the gentleman continued happily in office and retired peacefully thereafter. And the more interesting part is, after this report was submitted, or allegedly submitted, this judge went on indefinite leave. For more than a year, he was on leave as a serving judge of the Allahabad High Court. I don't know, brothers, whether you are aware of, at least because you two were judges of the High Courts. For more than a period of 1 year, this man was on leave. And His Excellency, the President of India, was pleased to sanction the leave. And all this tamasha going on in the Rajya Sabha, which went on yesterday about the imperium and Nobody ever raised or debated this question. Why did this man go on leave, and why did the President of India sanction the leave? God alone knows. Nobody discussed it. The whole thing came to public light after the successor Chief Justice wrote a letter to the Government of India recommending that action should be initiated against this particular judge. That's what Chalemeshwar mentioned in one of his articles. It appeared, I think in Hindu also it appeared those days. Not many papers published it. And before anybody could act on that recommendation, that gentleman retired very peacefully. And all this happens in a democracy. And look at the contribution of each one of the wings. Judiciary's contribution that we had such a judge is a bad thing, that's one story. The process when this kind of a complaint comes, we have come to believe in this country, Chief Justice is the Supreme Court. Rest of the judges are only, they're there, they're also there. No Chief Justice is required to share any information with anybody, even in matters like this. No, just to transfer one judge, unfortunately, my brother Kannan was transferred from here to some other high court. At least in the matter of transfer, it requires the presence of 5 judges and their signatures. A collegium meeting is required. In a matter like this, no member of the collegium was informed because second judge's case didn't deal with this matter. Therefore, there is no requirement. The master of the roster can do whatever he likes. And this is the constitutional culture we have in this country. Now, what is the role of the executive in this? When this gentleman was lamenting yesterday, saying that no newspaper, of course, it's a different story that all this episode, no newspaper published. Late Kaliko Pool's wife held a press conference at the Delhi Press Club, Mr. Ram. I'm sure you must be knowing it. Distributed the copies of the letter allegedly written, allegedly I'm saying because nobody ever investigated into those things. No newspaper published that item. Now, when this kind of a thing went on, neither the Rajya Sabha debated it, nor no newspaper ever discussed this matter about this particular judge's episode. Poor Kaleshwaram Raj wrote an article and Hindu was pleased to publish it. That's a different matter, but I don't know how many people in this country read it. This is the problem. This is the state of affairs. And in the process, we have a document called Constitution. How faithful are we, the people of India? Because the Constitution starts with the opening statement, we, the people of India. How faithful we are to that document is a question which each one of us must constantly, at least each one of us who are concerned with public affairs in this country, must constantly ask ourselves. Unless, the major problem in the country is we have a lot of illiterate masses. They don't understand. It's not that educated people are much different. That's a different story. Most of these illiterate people, actually their sense of right and wrong perhaps is far superior to the sense of right and wrong of very learned people in this country. That's another problem in this country. Now, but at least attempt must be made to communicate and inform these people, the masses of this country, about what is happening, what is right, and what is not right in the Constitution. We're talking about the Constitution, we're not talking about moral rights and things, constitutional correctness of things. That becomes part of the journalistic occupation. Now, at the bottom of all this, I am not going into the personal beliefs of individuals in this. There lived a great soul in Tamil Nadu, just about 80 kilometers from here, a place called Kanchipuram, the late Paramacharya of Kanchipuram. Immediately after the emergency was lifted in 1977, March, if I remember right, March I think it was lifted. March election was held. March election was held, maybe a month before that emergency was lifted. Unfortunately, I was young and I didn't have, I was more stupid in those days, I would put it that way. I didn't have the intelligence to preserve a copy of that thing. Some paper, I don't remember, it was Hindu or Indian Express, one of those two papers, somebody secured a interview with Paramacharya. I don't know, is it Hindu or Hindu? Hindu? I don't remember it, rather 40 years back. The only thing I remember in that interview is this, the last or penultimate question. The person who went and interviewed him asked him, Swami, but why did all this happen in this country about the emergency? He gave a very profound and in a way devastating answer. What else can happen to a country which loses all respect for truth, he said. That's the trouble. That's the trouble. That's exactly the point. Most of the people in this country are afraid of speaking truth. Even if they speak truth only in the drawing room. In the public sphere, they don't want to speak truth. Because it's not very pleasant, I know. What happens to people who speak truth, I know. In fact, there's a famous Telugu poet called Sri Sri. If any Telugu speaking person here? Okay, good. If you have by any chance read Sri Sri? Good. There is a poem, maybe somebody can translate, maybe I'll try to, though I'm not very good at translation. He says in one of his poems, poem is titled Professor's Report. That is the title. Actually, it is a true translation of an English piece. It broadly deals with human nature. The theme is, after entire mankind is wiped off the surface of Earth, if some professor were to make a report to some alien sitting somewhere in another galaxy, what would he write? At that point of time, King Emperor Ashoka, Gautama Buddha, or Abraham Lincoln, or Chalemeshwar, these fellows are irrelevant, including Jesus Christ and Gautama Buddha. Only relevant thing would be what is the broad human nature. That's how the poem proceeds. The last stanza says, it deals with all sorts of things anyway. It's a long poem, somebody can translate it. My young lady, if you can translate it, please do it. You'll be doing a great service to your friends. And last stanza, he says, there are some more, the residuary group in substance, loosely translated. Medhaulu, intellectuals. Jignasulu, those thinkers. But they were not allowed to live long. They were dispatched off as early as possible, either by crucifying them or shooting them or administering poison, he says. See, that's what happens to people who speak truth. But they're always bold and, chivalrous souls who always dare to speak truth in spite of all these problems. Well, as far as most of us are concerned, we played our role well or ill on the face of this planet. It's for you people now. The stage is open for you. Please remember these things. And one more thing, because this I forgot. When we are talking about democracy, all these values and systems, Noah Harari, in his last book, at least last book I have read, I don't know whether he published anything after that, book titled 21 Lessons for the 21st Century, in which he makes a very important statement. Most of the systems which we follow, political systems and the liberal democratic system, they were designed in an era of steam engines and, steam engines, not even telephone, telegrams and so on and so forth. But technology made huge strides thereafter. If these theories require a revisiting, if Karl Marx were to come back alive, a brilliant mind, come back alive, the man sat in London when the first war of Indian independence or Sipahi mutiny, depending upon how you choose to describe it, was happening here. Sitting in London, he wrote, "This is not going to succeed." And what brilliant mind it was, I don't know. And how could he imagine all those things, saying that what is going to happen in India? Now, if he were to come back alive today and write another theory, I don't know what would he write, how would he modify his capital, all his works, I don't know. But fact is, technology is making such rapid progress. All these theories, the liberal democratic theories, perhaps require fine-tuning. The systems, the institutions are required to be redesigned or at least reshaped. Because when we are talking about freedom of speech and privacy, of course, I was a member of that bench who asserted that we have a right of privacy. That is a theory. But the minute we purchase a smartphone, our constitutional right, the so-called constitutional right of privacy, is gone. Because everything about you, whatever is available on the phone, not even necessarily stored in the phone, your every movement from the morning, the minute you wake up, when you switch on the phone, sometimes even not switching on, even switched off phones can communicate material. So therefore, while we cherish that value of privacy, how to fine-tune it to the changing technological environment, these are all matters which require constant debate. Simply sitting and shouting in some elected body is not going to help us. No, it's your choice, it's your responsibility, if you feel responsible, to educate the people of this country as journalists. I think the time allotted to me is up, and I can go on like this, but that doesn't serve any purpose. I wish all the best to every one of you. I wish you a very bright, liberal future and a happy journalistic career ahead. Thank you.